Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. Jesse Poppick joining us here live today, back from his Italy trip, talking today about honesty, sexuality, and sales coaching. He does a lot, does it all, and he's really helping people embrace their true authenticity and so much more. So welcome back to New York City. How are you?
Thanks, Jill. Good to be back. Happy to be back. Italy was fantastic. I miss it already, and back into the grind here in New York City, though.
Yeah, but you still didn't miss us. You still kept your promise, and you had your show last week. So,
Yeah.
by the way, Jesse Poppick, spelled JESSEPOPPICK.com. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and I know we're going to get into a great discussion as always.
Yeah, for sure. So, I worked in ad technology for over 25 years in sales, and so I offer sales coaching, executive coaching, with a potential focus really on technology, advertising technology, but really in a broader perspective, sales in general. Yeah. That's where I come from, and in more recent years, I've moved more towards coaching around honesty and human sexuality. And last week we talked a little bit about the first 3 of 6 principles of sexual health, as they have been developed by this place called the Harvey Institute, which I'm a big fan of. Run by 2 sex therapists who worked with a larger group of therapists here in the U.S. to develop these 6 principles. And last week I really enjoyed talking with you about the first 3, right? Consent, non-exploitive, and honesty. And this week I'm hoping to dive into the next 3. And then next week when we talk, I want to talk just more about honesty, which happens to be the third principle of sexual health, but also honesty is something that I think is incredibly important, not something that we talk enough about. And there's a philosophy called radical honesty, which I'm going to get into in more detail with you next week.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm not a singer, but ready? Honesty, such a lonely world. Is that the words? Is that Billy Joel?
I think it's a lonely word. Yeah.
Lonely world or word. Yeah, it's that word. Yeah.
As 2 New Yorkers, we should know the lyrics to that song.
That's what I'm thinking about. Right? Honesty. Yeah. Okay. But go ahead.
All right. So, and so I offer coaching around honesty, around sexuality, and around sales. It's a strange combination, that's for sure. As you said, I do it all. I don't think I do it all. I do just a few things really well. So let's get into it, because the 6 principles of sexual health, just to start from the top, right? Consent is number 1, non-exploitive is number 2, honesty is number 3. And we talked a bit about each of those last week. This week, I want to get into shared values, which is number 4, protection and pleasure, which is kind of an important and often overlooked part of human sexuality, sadly enough. So the shared values piece, I really like how the shared values principle is definitely tied to honesty. And what the shared values principle is really about is if you and I are just starting dating, that situation probably requires a level of honesty that maybe not all of us are ready to dive into. But in order for me to reveal myself to you in terms of like, what do I like to do sexually? And that can be risky, especially at the beginning of a relationship or beginning of meeting people. But I also find it really interesting that even people who've been together for a long time still have difficulty expressing what their shared values are, and expressing it to someone who they've known for years and maybe even been married to or been with for a long time. That there's still some reluctance to be that honest with our partners occasionally. Mm-hmm. The point around shared values, though, is really to identify, what do I like and what do you like, and are we on the same page? Is our shared values or lack of shared values going to be a deal breaker in our relationship, right? And if I told you that I, only like to have, sexual activities outside, I never have sex inside, and you're like, that's not for me. Well, if I'm able to tell that to you right from the beginning, then maybe we can avoid, confusion, embarrassment, anger, resentment in the future, if we can get on the same page about that right away.
How do you find someone who's just as honest as you? That's the hard part.
I mean, I will say, Jill, seriously though, I have found in my personal experience, if I'm honest with you, the likelihood that you might be honest with me too goes up if I'm available, right? If I'm available to be vulnerable with you, most of my experiences would indicate
Would
that
be.
it's reciprocated, right? If I can,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if I reveal myself to you, then I put my guard down. Maybe this makes you feel more comfortable, more safe, and maybe it gives you the room to also be honest with me,
Yeah.
hopefully, right? So shared values, right? To serve, I'm just going to read the straight up definition from the Harvey Institute. Values that serve as a source of identifying one's sexual standards and ethics.
Okay.
And this is really important. Some people are into some kinky shit, and that's fine. They need to find each other, and in order to find each other, they need to be somewhat vulnerable and reveal themselves. I think with our connected world these days, it's easier to find people who do have common shared values, and the ability to be true to yourself about what that means is going to really be helpful with the person that you're interacting with. And I think that it really does encourage the individual to reflect on this stuff. We talked a little bit about this last week too. Like, you have to know yourself,
Yeah.
right? You have to ask yourself questions. Yeah, what are my values? What do I like? What don't I like? There's a bit of boundary setting around these shared values too, right? There are certain things that will be deal breakers.
Yep.
And this means I have to think about that.
Yeah.
I can't just rely on other people to tell me. I have to be able to tell other people about myself. So this can be really challenging, and can really require a hard look in the mirror, to really get in touch with, and reveal to oneself what they're into, before even being able to share that with other people. So recognizing and aligning with shared values with another person or other people, does, I imagine, help create a much more fulfilling and respectful sexual relationship or sexual encounter. Hopefully no one will be caught off guard or be caught surprised by what I might be into or what you're into. But it does require that ability to reveal oneself and be vulnerable. So it's scary, and it requires honesty for sure, right? The next one, number 5, protection. This one is extremely important. Protection not only from diseases, which I think we all can agree, none of us are looking to get an STI or STD when we're interacting with another person, but also pregnancies, right? And I am happily a man who has been vasectomized for the better part of the last 15 years. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and in my early 40s, I decided that was enough. That was enough babies for me. Male sterilization is free. Actually, it cost me $0 to get my vasectomy.
Is it really? Is it free
Yeah.
for women too?
No, that's the thing.
That is just so not fair, but that's so crazy.
It is.
Oh, but it's also, I look at it this way too. I compare it to like, I had to pay for IVF out of pocket, but men, if they can't get an erection, they can go to the doctor and get a free pill. It's like not fair. Why is their body parts more important than our body parts of reproduction? But okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but it's true. I mean, like, yeah, to get your tubes tied or to get a hysterectomy is going to cost you money. That's not, those things are usually not covered by insurance, but male sterilization through vasectomy is 100% covered. It's a pretty simple operation. Like, to even call it an operation is a bit of an exaggeration. It took 20 minutes. I went to Mount Sinai here in New York, and they put me in what was, I imagine, an updated broom closet. It was a very quick procedure. Recovery was pretty straightforward. Reversing the vasectomy can be very challenging and expensive. And there are many men in their 50s who choose to reverse their vasectomies, and they're not always successful. But vasectomies in and of themselves don't protect us from disease. It only protects us from unwanted pregnancies. But I do like to mention that because the irony is not lost that for men it's free and for women it's not, right? And the whole idea of for unwanted pregnancies, that this falls on women, right, to take the pill or to use a barrier method of some kind. I mean, men have condoms and vasectomies, and that's about it, right? I imagine there could be a pill for men, so I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's got to be coming up and it works. That's a good question.
I hope so. And this will be easy. The vasectomy is permanent, and I imagine we pay for it to be that way. But again, protecting ourselves from diseases is really important. I don't think that too many people Well, in order to protect ourselves, right? Barrier methods are great, condoms are great, and that's really the best way to protect ourselves from STIs or STDs. And it absolutely the whole idea of protecting ourselves. It's not only for us but for our partner. And I've had my fair share of of minor sexually transmitted diseases. I'll fully admit I had chlamydia a couple of times, which is fortunately a very easy one to treat. It's a very easy one to recognize. And I have also, had some unwanted pregnancies in my lifetime as well. So had to deal with those situations. And those are not easy, right? Those are not easy to deal with. Even though I have three beautiful daughters today, there were times where I was younger and mistakes were made. So facing that is also really challenging and requires a level of honesty and connection with your partner to face those situations as well. So we want to avoid those situations, and so protecting ourselves from unwanted pregnancies and diseases is pretty critical. And I think of all of these principles, I want to believe that the protection piece is the one that's most prominent for most people. I mean, I think men are reluctant to put on a condom. I think women have probably heard all kinds of excuses as to I can't feel anything. I don't want to do this. But quite honestly, I think this is the easiest reached principle. It's one that I think most people are most familiar with, and it does do a great deal to protect our personal health and the health of our partners too. So, an absolutely important principle. When the Harvey Institute first developed these principles, they only had 5. And this was the last one, the protection piece. And as I said, these 6 principles were developed by a group of therapists working together at a conference to come up with them. And my understanding is, and I don't think this is rumor, or maybe it is, because I don't know exactly, but my understanding is that, the pleasure was not included, that there were 5 principles of sexual health. And that as this convention went on, some smart person said, wait a minute, I think we're missing something here. And that's the 6th principle, which is pleasure. And in our Judeo-Christian, American upbringing from our forefathers who were, what was it? What's the word I'm looking for? The folks who shy away from everything, Puritans, right? Really, we were Puritan.
That's it. I couldn't think of it either. Okay.
Before the Judeo-Christian piece came in, we were Puritans, and so that's bled into our culture. And the idea of finding pleasure in general is, again, something that I think as a society we shy away from talking about. And certainly sexual pleasure, we like to use it in advertising. We like to be titillated when we watch a movie or listen to a song even, but God forbid we actually have a discussion about pleasuring ourselves or pleasuring our partners sexually. This is forbidden and looked down upon, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Automatically
crazy.
judged and
Yeah.
talked about, and yep.
Yeah, and I think I've said this in the last couple of sessions that we've talked about too. Like, none of us would be here if it wasn't for sex, and most of us do find pleasure in sexual activity. Again, either solo or with a partner or partners. And why aren't we talking more about this? Why it's something that's so obvious and so common in so many ways, but yet is kept in the shadows and not talked about. And I think that's pretty sad, quite honestly. Life is full of pitfalls and full of struggles for all of us. I don't think there's a human being on this planet who doesn't face struggle of some kind. And so why can't we celebrate the momentary pleasures of certain activities? And it doesn't even have to be sexual. Again, I think the whole idea of pleasure seeking within sexual activities is great, but there's so many other pleasurable things we can be looking for and talking about in our lives. And to me, it's just, it's not even ironic. It's sad that we don't talk about finding pleasure more often in many things, not just sex.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we're made to feel ashamed or embarrassed, or and then I'm gonna say something. There's been a lot of my friends have been talking about this OnlyFans website, and I started researching what OnlyFans is. Are you aware what it is?
oh yeah, sure.
So most people do explicit things on there sexually with their partners or with themselves, and there was an article I think in the Post the other day about another girl that has an OnlyFans page or something. She got fired from her job in Australia because they found out, like, who are they to judge what she does? And when she does that and she does make explicit videos, her marketing job let her go. And I just feel like that is so. Oh, I hate that people judge people. You know, she's there, that's part of her and her life, and why, who are we to judge her? So anyway, just a part, it brought to my attention, it was in the Post the other day about this woman who was fired. But you hear about the time after time after time that people are being judged, or if they discover they have this other side of life where they're more sexual, it's like, why? It's just so sad that the normal society can't accept them for who they are.
Yeah, it is. It is
It
sad.
makes you think about within, well, what's wrong with you within to think like this, and why? Yeah, but
And you mentioned like shame and
mm-hmm,
we attach so much shame to our own bodies and to finding pleasure with our bodies, that there's something that we
yeah,
shouldn't be, that this is something we shouldn't be doing.
mm-hmm,
I don't want to, I mean, look, I'll lay a lot of this guilt on organized religion, although I was
yeah,
raised basically without organized religion, and I still found myself struggling with guilt and shame around
mm-hmm,
sexuality because our society in general places a lot of these judgments on ourselves, and we buy that. Um, and it's something really honestly requires some strength to work against, this whole
yeah,
idea of promoting pleasure, again, just in general, not even sexually. The idea that hedonism, or that having a good time in what you do and whatever you're doing, is looked down upon. And this woman who's doing OnlyFans in her free time, yeah, I don't imagine that person should be judged or fired from their job
yeah.
for what they're doing with their own free time. Um, I think a lot of people probably on OnlyFans don't use their real names, but even still, yeah, it's an interesting struggle. I imagine this also can spin out into a discussion, generally speaking, about sex work. Right, there are sex
Mhm.
work in general was kept in the shadows for most of my last 50 years of my life, but now sex workers are coming out and becoming more vocal about what they do and how they do it, and some sex workers, I think, do follow along with these principles of sexual health, certainly the protection piece. But
Yep.
the idea that in certain countries sex work is not illegal,
Mhm.
and is actually supported
Yep.
with medical support, and is supported as a viable job option for some people who choose to do that. I think that's great. I think that, again, that can be celebrated.
Yeah.
In our country, in the United States here, yeah, we have a very different outlook on it. And the moralisms that come with all this, really, again, I tie a lot of it to religion. As I said, I wasn't raised a religious person, and I still am tied to the moralisms and the struggles around shame with sexuality. And this is one of the reasons why I like to talk about this. I want to shine a light on all of these topics,
Mhm.
because I don't feel like I'm alone, right? Just even speaking with you, we barely know each other, but yet we agree that a lot of
Yeah, we
this
have a
stuff,
lot of similar, I
right?
think,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
outlooks and values. Yep.
yeah, and I like the idea that these six principles too can be an arbiter of discussion, right? I
Mhm.
mean, they're a good starting point to talk about. And as I mentioned last week too, like, the strictness with which you follow these principles, I imagine, can be looked at in the same way of, not everyone's healthy all the time. If you can
Mhm.
check all six boxes, fantastic. If you can check 4 out of 6, that's better than none. And I used, I think, the example last week of, like, people eat junk food and smoke cigarettes. That's unhealthy. People know that they're being unhealthy when they're choosing to do those things, and they still
So
choose
true.
to do those occasionally. And so similarly, I don't think that these principles need to be adhered to so strictly. I think if you can check all six boxes, you're golden, right? And you can, from your own self, say, yeah, what I'm doing here is healthy for myself and for my partners. If there's one or two that's missing, well, recognizing that, right, and talking about that, and not shying away from the fact that, yeah, you know what, I didn't use protection the last time, or
Mhm.
actually our values aren't 100% shared. There are certain things that I'm not 100% on board with, but that leads to a discussion, right? Hopefully. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I want to read something from the Harvey Institute that they talk about with regard to these six principles, right? And I think it kind of reflects a little bit of what I was just saying in terms of how stringently we follow them. The six principles of sexual health provide a framework right? A framework for fostering healthy, respectful, and satisfying sexual relationships while emphasizing an importance of consent, which for a long time, consent wasn't even considered something to talk about, and even in our lifetime, even in the last 40 or
Yeah.
50 years. So importance of consent, communication, and protection against sexual health risks. They're designed to guide individuals and professionals in promoting sexual well-being and ensuring that sexual experiences are based on respect, safety, and pleasure. And to kind of expand a little bit more on these 6 principles, I actually looked at and wanted to see if there was some crossover between this type of sexual health for individuals and talking about these 6 principles in the workplace, which again, I think raises a lot of hackles. The idea that, well, we don't talk about sex at all, and we certainly don't talk about sex at work or with our coworkers. That there's potential here for, a sexual harassment lawsuit or some feeling of coercion, and so we're not going to talk about these principles or talk about anything sexual at work. But I think it's really interesting is that I dropped some of these principles into into an AI chat, and got back some information about how to transfer these to the workplace, right?
Oh,
And a lot of them do transfer to the workplace,
okay.
right? Consent, right? Workplace. When you're working in an office or working in a retail place, like having consent to being asked to do the job you're doing, like you need to buy in on that. You need to give consent to your employer to do the job, and also to be able to, within a work environment, say no, like I'm not going to do that. Obviously, non-exploitive workplace is something we all strive for, and we obviously have laws that talk about exploitation and avoidance of exploitation. I don't know if you've been aware of the news lately about kids that are coming into this country, migrants who are working, underage kids, right? And it's shocking to me that that's happening now. It's equally shocking that not much is being done to stop that, and I think that definitely, I think we can agree that falls into exploitation.
Yeah.
Right. Being honest at work, this can be risky. And I'm going to talk more about honesty next week in general, and then in 2 weeks talk about honesty at work from a sales coaching perspective, because I don't know, honesty always worked for me as a salesperson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shared values at work as well, like being able to understand your coworkers' values and what you're working towards together. If you are working with other people, that also is a principle that you can pull from sexual health into the workplace. Protection. I mean, this seems kind of strange to talk about unwanted pregnancies and sexually transmitted diseases at work, but I've worked in industries where, yeah, people are hooking up at work occasionally in the back room or in the bathroom or whatever. So, not that that's, again, I can make myself embarrassed talking about that. Right. But this is a fact. I mean, there are certain places where that happens and people do connect at work. And so again, in those situations, being protected is really important. And then, pleasure, I think pleasure at work, and I'm not just talking about sexual pleasure. This goes back to what I was saying before about our desire to find pleasure in the things that we do, sexual or otherwise. And I've certainly worked at a number of jobs that I did not find pleasurable. And I certainly loved the jobs that I did find pleasurable. And so seeking pleasure even within the workplace sounds a little funky, but I think, but we all agree, right? We want to love our jobs.
It's true. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We want to get pleasure out of what we do. Otherwise it is just a burden. And then why are we bothering?
True.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Jesse, I apologize. We have to go.
Yeah, sure.
Would you mind sharing how we could reach you?
Absolutely.
Thank you for understanding our technical difficulties today.
No, technical difficulties happen. It's the interwebs. So the website is my name, jessepoppick.com, JESSEPOPPICK.com. And the email address is YOU at jessepoppick.com. You can email me with questions, check out the website, check out the offerings for coaching, facilitation. And Jill, I'm looking forward to our next couple of sessions together.
Thank you. Same here. Welcome back to New York City. Welcome to the fall weather. Welcome to the rain.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Thank you so much, Jesse. Always appreciate it.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.